let's see, a couple things on Canvas. All of the recordings and PowerPoints are up to today. And I know it's a little bit slow to get some of the other ones up, but they're up now. There's one last 10-minute art fix, or 12 minutes, whatever, right, on symbolism that's up. I put that up a couple days ago. That will be the last one of those extracurricular, right, outside of the class art fixes. And I think I have two more worksheets to put up, right? So when I do, I'll send you an email when those are up. Okay, remember that today was sort of the deadline for a whole bunch of them going back to number 5, I think, right? I said I would take up till today. And there's a few more that are coming due through the weekend, okay? So the last two I haven't written up yet. They're 3 or 4 years old, so I haven't used them in the interim, and I doubt the questions are correct anymore, right? Because I think it's good things for the year. So when those go up, I'll email you. Remember also that your final paper is due next Thursday, is that correct? Yes, last day of class. And if you got me your progress report, your bibliography not late, I'll get that back to you tonight or tomorrow morning. Okay, for those who didn't come in on time, and I had to remind to bring it in. So if you're on that list, you will get comments from me, but not until tonight or tomorrow. Okay. So we are going to make it to the 20th century today. No matter what I do, by hook or cut by crook, I always end up ending at about the exact same spot, and I really wish it were different than that, and I'm going to spend my entire summer getting less Renaissance art so we can get more modern. It's just hard because there's just so much here, and I kind of like the Renaissance. It's what I do when I'm doing scholarship, but anyway, I like modern too. So we left off talking about post-impressionism. These are a group of artists that were associated with the Impressionists and share quite a bit with them. Group of artists, that's the wrong term. They didn't function as a group, right? A group that we tend to associate with them. But the Impressionists were a bona fide group, right? The Impressionists actually had group identity. And the post-Impressionists, some of them were in and out of that group. Some of them were a little bit on the fringe. And because they all give us images of late 19th century France, right? Everyday life in this period that is, the sort of the dreamland of Paris for everybody. We tend to lump them all together, right? Sloppily. Everybody from Manet onward. But Manet was invited to join the group and he didn't. I don't think Toulouse-Lautrec ever showed with them. Van Gogh did, or joined with some of the group, was tutored by some of the Impressionists. But they really kind of went their own direction. And that varied kind of directions of art in the 1880s and the 1890s was noted by a number of scholars in the 1920s, and they said, this is not the same. Post-Impressionism. Over and above that, the Impressionists as a group, remember that they had group identity. There was a group of, they showed together. The first show was in 1874, and they had 8 more shows, or 8 shows total, over the next 12 years. So 1886 is the very last Impressionist show. Right? They don't show together as a group anymore after that. What's interesting is that in that 12 years, they really ended up almost single-handedly ending the tradition of the French Academy, the Royal Academy Salon. They've been going on every year or every 2 years, going back to the 17th century. And when the Impressionists challenged the authority of the Salon, it brought the Salon more or less to an end. And what we have are a series of smaller exhibitions every year, rather than one big one. Right? So, these artists, 1880s, late 1880s, 1890s, are called post-impressionists. Not only are they after the Impressionists are done with their run, but they're also doing things different from the Impressionists. And so with Toulouse-Lautrec, we were talking about how much his biography entered into it, because his works, the direction he heads, that's different from the Impressionists, is that his works are very subjective. The colors do not describe objectively what he saw, but they are chosen for other reasons, usually expressive reasons. So the woman in the back on the right, this woman here, probably her hair was not quite so orange as that, right? And we saw before with the work that's in the textbook, that woman with the green face, right? Inspired by the floodlights that he would have seen in these cabarets that he hung out in, but at the same time the colors are often chosen for expressive purposes, subjective expression, rather than objective observation, right? Monet is trying to really capture the sense of what something really looked like for that instant he saw it. The man in the bowler on the left, right? Green in the gills. I mean, he's drinking absinthe, right? That's a glass of absinthe on the table, and his cheek and his jowls are kind of the same color as that wormwood-based drink, right? Other things are subjective as well. We talked about the interest in this sort of calligraphic outline that you see on the sleeve here, right, is also incredibly subjective. And then the facial structures seem more like cartoons or caricatures rather than trying to focus on what they might have really looked like. It's all very, very subjective. And this subjectivity that we see in his art, and this is true for Van Gogh as well, this sets the stage for who we're talking about now. This subjectivity that we see in this particular offshoot of post-impressionism leads us to want to talk about their biography, because it's so subjective, it's so personal to them. And we find often that the literature on Toulouse-Lautrec, the literature on Van Gogh, is caught up in their biographies, right? Toulouse-Lautrec came from a very, very wealthy family. They had, by this time, 600, almost 700 years of wealth. The Toulouse family and Lautrec family were landed gentry going back to the feudal days in southeastern France, no, southwestern France, right? Toulouse-Lautrec was born with birth defects. He had very, very weak bone structure, and he literally shattered both of his thighs in separate accidents within a year of each other when he was around 12 years old. This stunted his growth. Right? Very, very short, because his legs stopped growing. And he ended up hanging out in the sort of dangerous, seedy parts of Paris. In the Moulin de la Galette, for example, and the others, the Moulin Rouge, which you know from Baz Luhrmann movies and whatnot. These were not particularly high-class joints, right? These were places where the underworld would hang out as well. And this was true right through the 1950s. Right? He was slumming it. His mother hated him for it, right? And he was getting publicly drunk. And picking fights, being loud, having arguments, fights, but, vocal interludes with his friends. His mother, of course, didn't really like this. This is not how the scion of this family should behave. Right? Biography enters into it. Same thing holds true with Vincent van Gogh. It's impossible to read about Vincent van Gogh without reading about his biography, that he was a nut job. He literally went insane. He incarcerated himself. He enlisted himself in an asylum. When Gauguin, his friend, the artist Gauguin, went to leave after visiting for a few weeks, Van Gogh cut off his ear. You've all heard this story, I think. Right? The man was a little unbalanced. And it's hard not to think about his work and their subjective approach to what the artist sees, not objective but subjective, and not read it within this, through this lens of his biography, knowing that he was unbalanced. Right? Speaking of biography, he came from Holland. You might tell from his name. right? That he's from, not from France, but from something that speaks Dutch, right? Van. And he had moved to Paris to join with the Impressionists. He was schooled by one of the founding members of the Impressionists, somebody we didn't look at, who encouraged him to paint outside. But he didn't really like Paris. He didn't like the big city. He wanted to be a preacher to begin with, and I think his sort of moralizing tendencies kind of got in the way. And he moves down to the south of France, in Provence, to the town of Arles, which is where he spends most of the last 3 or 4 years of his life. And he's painting like a bad use of term. He's painting like a bat out of hell, right? He's just like literally 3 or 4 canvases a day. He paints so much, right? He just cranks them out. He can't stop painting while he's there. And this is a cafe that he frequented. We now call, he calls it the Café de Nuit under his signature in the lower right corner, Vincent. And it's kind of an interesting comparison because knowing Van Gogh's precarious mental state, it's interesting to look at how each of these two artists envision what it's like to be in a cafe at night. Toulouse-Lautrec puts us up close and personal. We're part of the group. We're drinking with everybody. The whole crowd sort of comes around us and surrounds us, right? We're there. We're in it. We're part of it. Even the other pictures from your textbook, we see him in the picture, milling about with the other people there. Van Gogh, look where we are. Look where you were Van Gogh. You're painting this from his point of view. Where are you relative to everybody in that bar? You are tucked in the corner as tight as you can be, and nobody is coming anywhere near you. Not the least of which is the barkeep, who seems to be hiding behind the pool table, right? Afraid to sort of, what's Crazy Vincent going to order? You know, I'm not going to yell at me again. And everybody in this bar, Toulouse-Lautrec's bar is a bar with fun, right? Noise and whatnot. Is there any sound in this cafe? Right? Look at the 2 guys on the right. Boy, they are tucked in. The fellow on the left, just past that place where people stand to drink. And that poor couple who wandered into this place probably can't wait to get back out that door. You know? This is I think this image reflects very much Van Gogh's mental outlook and the way he saw the work. It's a subjective piece, right? Expressive. And this is a hallmark of one of the trends of post-impressionism. A couple of details. The color choices are totally non-descriptive. Right? So we see the light coming off of that oil, probably oil lamp, maybe it's electrical, at this point. But you'll notice the greens and the oranges and the yellows. Right? To say nothing of the red walls or the green roof or the yellow floor. None of these are the descriptive colors. These are expressive colors that Van Gogh is using to establish a mood. Here's a close-up of our people at the bar. Like the Impressionists, Van Gogh leaves his brushstrokes unblended, rough, and sketchy on the surface. But at the same time, they're so much more thickly applied than any of our Impressionists, than Degas, than Cassatt, than Monet. And that adds to this expressive quality. There's something very gestural about the way he puts the paper. Look at the coat of the bartender with that wonderful green mustache, right, and green eyebrows. It's not the colors he's seeing, right? It's using the color juxtaposition between greens and oranges, opposites on the color wheel, to make it jarring and vibrant in the same way that his brushstrokes do the same thing. Right? They bring expressiveness everywhere we look. Now, we're very lucky. We got about a dozen Van Goghs floating around town. Right? Not floating, they're all pretty much going on to one place or another. In fact, the National Gallery just got to about 2 years ago from Bunny Mellon when they closed up the estate. But I want to look at the one that's over, one of the ones that's at the Phillips collection. Because I think this one
reflects some of the alienation that I was talking about with the Night Cafe, where we see a place where people gather, this time during the day, the public gardens in the city of Arles. And where is Vincent relative to the garden? He's out on the street. And there are these little visual clues. The edge of the garden is very clearly delineated. Did he have to do that? No, but he did. There's a line between him and the people. Right? And the people in the garden, if we look closely at them, again, we see Vincent's wonderful brushwork. But we can also see that the majority of the people in the park are not behaving like a community. They're not engaging with each other. Everyone is in their own little space bubble, you know? They're not at all contacting each other. They're just walking through the park or trying to be alone. And I think that when we talk about the expressive quality of Vincent van Gogh's work, and we talk about his biography, it's hard not to think that that's got something to do with it. Right? That he feels alienated anyway, increasingly so. Right? He wanted other artists to come and join him down in Arles. Nobody wanted to. Gauguin finally did and said, oh man, if I go 2 weeks, and this is too much. Right? I've had enough. So Van Gogh is very much, I think, this expressiveness, this subjectivity must be related back to his mounting psychosis. You'll also notice past the head of the woman in lavender there. You can see again, he's using opposites on the color wheel often. He does this all the time to give the surface of the painting vibrancy. So again, greens and oranges immediately next to each other, reds and blues put next to each other as well. Then there's this guy, right, reading a paper, standing, and what a stance, right? Like this. It's like he's guarding the public gardens, right? He's a public guard, right? And he's got no face, right? He looks like, the scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz, but in a more frightening version. Actually, when I was a kid, this is how I wasted my childhood. Well, maybe not, but anyway, I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. And in old Batman comics, there was this character named the Scarecrow, who had no features. He wore this hat and had this sack pulled over his face. That's kind of what he looks like. But what Van Gogh is trying to emphasize here is that there's no contact. When you don't have a face, when he doesn't bother to give him a face, he gives him this green brushstroke, he's suggesting that he doesn't know anything about this guy. That adds to that barrier of alienation between Van Gogh and the people around him. Right? The most famous of these works, right, the Starry Night up in New York at the Museum of Modern Art, where even though there aren't any people to be seen, these same themes of alienation, fear, separation, are also very, very present. Now, this was painted after he had been checked into an asylum, right, also in the south of France, not far from Arles, about 20 miles or so away from Arles. And this was the view from his cell window. Now, he was voluntarily admitted, so he could have left anytime he wanted to, but he wanted out, right? And so this is looking out in the sky. And you see, I think, in this, the public gardens, the Night Cafe, Van Gogh sees movement where there is none. Van Gogh sees energy where things are stable. The sky gives off this hum, right? It's easy to hear Van Gogh pictures, isn't it? He even talked about the winds down in Provence and how he loved being able to hear the landscape, hear the olive trees. But in this case, everything seems moving. That cypress tree in the foreground looks more like flame. It's the wrong color, but it's the right shape. To be flames rising up. Right? Down below, the landscape itself looks almost like a tidal wave coming in. The way the trees in the lower right corner are handled here. right? Look like rolling waves coming in. Everything seems tumultuous and moving. And I think this is true of the public gardens as well, if you look at the trees behind. Or if you look back at the night cafe and look at those orbs of light coming off of the lamps inside, all of it suggests a sort of pantheistic interest in a nature that for him is ever changing. Right? And I think that relates again to what we were talking about with Van Gogh's own mental state. The alienation theme is here strong as well, because if you look down into the village from the hill where the asylum is, you see a church. He amplifies the steeple of the church. He makes it larger than it is. Church is a symbol of community, but he's nowhere near it. Nestled around the church are all these houses, and people are up at night. Everybody's there. Everybody's awake. Right? These are human presences without human figures. And they are up and they're happy and they're warm, and where's Vincent? In an asylum, in a cell, by himself. It's an incredibly lonely picture. But again, it's hard not to associate this with his biography, right? Now, eventually, he's released from the asylum. He goes out, he feels he's well. His pictures kind of calm down a bit. The brushstrokes that you see flying around, the Milky Way that looks like it's swirling and moving, that sort of settles down a bit, you know? And he ends up moving closer to Paris to be closer to his brother, who's buying him all his paints anyway. It doesn't last. Last 3 months of his life, he paints like 70 pictures in 3 months, which is pretty amazing, right? Then he shoots himself in the chest, which is really frightening. Because, you know, it's one thing to want to die, and it's another thing to want to suffer, right? Most people who shoot themselves choose a quicker way out, where you don't have time to think about it. Vincent shot himself in the chest. He bled to death overnight, right? It took him a couple days to die. But again, that's almost the only outcome that could have come from this poor man's life. Right? So, with Van Gogh and Toulouse-Lautrec, we're seeing one trend of post-impressionism, which is this trend toward self-expression. Right? A trend toward non-objective views. And moving away from objectivity in order to emphasize subjective expression. Colors become unnatural. Right? Forms become unrealistic. All to the point of helping to aid the expressive qualities of the work. This is not the only trend of post-impressionism. Right? There are various artists moving in various directions that are all under this umbrella that we now call post-impressionism. What holds them together is that they are working in the 80s and 90s after the Impressionists have broke up. And they're doing things that are quite different from what we saw most of the card-carrying Impressionists do during the 12 years that they were together. The other great post-impressionist, and there's quite a few, but by one of my favorites, is Cézanne, Paul Cézanne. He was a founding member of the Impressionists. He was back in 1873 when Monet gathered those 30 artists together who had all been rejected multiple times in the 1860s from the Salon to found their new independent group with their own exhibitions, right? Cézanne was part of that group. He lives for another 30-plus years. However, while he's in Paris in the 1870s, when the Impressionists show, Cézanne's works are vilified in the press. They hate him. And I got to say, early Cézanne, it's kind of bad, right? Which I find is kind of, in a way, you guys are students. When I was a student, and I found out that Cézanne kind of sucked until he was in his 30s, I was like, yes, excellent, I still can do it. You know, there's still a chance, there's still time to learn. Now that I'm in my 50s, like, okay, it's past. But, you know, at the time, I was like, great. So Cézanne across the creek, and he becomes, I think, of all of the artists that we're looking at here, we talked about Manet being the father of modernism, but I don't think there's any artist of the 19th century who is as important for 20th century art as Paul Cézanne. Now, this is a 20th century picture, 1904, right? But the majority of his career is 19th century. Right? So, this is up in Philadelphia, but we'll look at the local examples as well, right? To talk about. But this is probably the best of the series of pictures he did of a mountain in the south of France. Because after those rotten reviews, he decided, I'm done with the Parisian art world. I'm done with these critics. And he moves back to the town he grew up in, outside of Marseille, right? Now, we'll get to that coming up on the slide. But James, you had your hand up before, and I was on a roll. I didn't know. I think this is fantastic. I love this thing. I think this is brave. This is bold. This is forward looking, and I'll tell you why. Okay. One of the things that Cézanne was doing. This is where Cézanne's brand of post-impressionism differs from Toulouse-Lautrec or Van Gogh. What Cézanne said after he moved to the south of France, after he moved to Aix, was, here, I don't know if it's coming up on the slide, so I'm writing on the board. Right? The town he grew up in is Aix-en-Provence. And it's literally, like from here to Germantown, from the city of Marseille, which is the second biggest city in all of France, right? And right at the France, here's Spain, right? Here's Lisbon, first down here. A keen map drawing skills, right? So he's done Aix-en-Provence. Here's Mont-Victoire. That's sort of between Marseille and Aix. So it's one of the largest cities in the region. And this really heavy, marbly, choppy, desolate landscape. And he paints it again and again and again. Okay? Now, when he starts to work, he also starts to write about what he's doing. And he says that one of the reasons he left, right, we all know now it's partly because he got bad reviews, but one of the reasons he left, he said, was that the Impressionists lacked staying power. That when he looked at their paintings, he didn't see the kind of permanence that you see when you look at paintings in museums. Right? In other words, because they were impressions, right, they're not lasting, they're not permanent, like the things you see in museums. And he said what he wanted to do, I'll give you the second row. What he wanted to do was try to make landscape paintings that had a sense of solidity and permanence. And one of his most famous quotes was he said the way to achieve this was to paint everything as if it were geometric. He said, base everything on the cylinder, right, the square and the cone. Right? Structure the composition. Right? So back at Monet, he said it's got no structure. It's too loose, fluid. And he wants to make something that has solidity, where every part of the composition is knitted together, and every part of the composition has a sense of structure. That's what he's aiming at. Right? Now, Rose. It had their run. People started moving these. Why didn't anybody break them? Why didn't the Stones? No, they weren't. That's a really interesting question. The Impressionists never really had a group identity. Like, when we talk about Impressionists, we talk about Monet. That's really what we're talking about. Monet and Degas, right? And this idea of open brushwork and impressions of a given atmospheric moment. Not every impressionist did that. Because really what they were to begin before the name stuck. Right? This is typical for modern art. when a group comes out and does radically new things, they'll get a negative criticism of that. Okay, right? We'll program ourselves. And so, there was the independent society of thinkers. Smaller type of stuff, but thinkers, right? And they were all people who were sick and tired of the salon, right? And the academy. Why did they break up? They wanted to, they didn't have a manifesto, right? Unlike, for example, the pre-Raphaelites, remember Ophelia closing down with, I got a manifesto. They had something like, okay, look, Europe sucks. And you know where to start. So they had to sit and written down the manifesto. They had lists of people that they figured in the world, right? They were in published journals. The press didn't do it. So they did that. So the rest of the binding together, there's no case. Right? But secondly, by 1886, the Salon's power is gone, and there are multiple other places for them to show their work and get out to the public and get claimed. Not only are there alternative major exhibition venues with more modern subjects, right? But there also is the same kind of happened by 1880 or so, the rise of the gallery, which is what we have today, right? Where you go see modern art, then you go to a museum, you go to a big state-sponsored show, you go to a local representative, a local gallery, right? And those have become popping up everywhere by 1880. So there was no need to have a group that's existing anymore. They can just go to Ruel's gallery, right? Choose any one of the number of them, right? Unwild gallery. I mean, there were plenty of things. So the work was done. I think that's kind of the long and short of it, right? It's not that they had a manifesto, but the whole point of impressionism was to circumvent the stranglehold of the salon, and that work was done. I could give you a shorter answer. Okay, is that a good answer? I made up half of it. I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. It's relatively accurate. Okay? So, let's get back to now Cezanne. And James, why I like his work so much, right? Is that he wants to give, he's really interested in the composition. So, whereas Toulouse-Lautrec and Van Gogh are interested in personal expression, right? What's inside comes out. What Cezanne is interested in is how do the different parts of the composition all fit together, and every one of them have a really prominent role to play in making it work, right? And so what he does is to activate every part of it, right? As he looks out across this field, he looks down and he sees houses and he sees trees, and it stretches back to this amazing rock face of the mountain, right? And as he paints it, again, he's not going to try to describe it verbatim, right? He's not going to try to reflect exactly what he sees. But at the same time, he's not going to necessarily try to give us some insight into how he feels. Instead, what he's going to do is try to figure out how he can make the parts fit together better for the composition, because the composition is more important than what you see. Right? What happens in that frame is more important than being true to nature. Right? So, what he does is he breaks it down and he looks at the trees and the fields and the areas between them. There's a aqueduct that becomes this straight line over here. And he begins to break it apart and put it back together again. And when he's putting it back together again, the guiding logic is what role does it play here? Not, is that a tree? Is that a house? Right? That's not the guiding logic. The guiding logic is what role does this patch of paint play in the overall composition? Okay? And this is breaking kind of all the rules, right? So some close-ups of this. This is a little hot, right? This is a little bit oversaturated, but you get a sense that he's looking at that he really doesn't care if these yellow, oranges, and greens are trees or paths or fields or roofs of houses. What he's doing is he's stitching together, he's knitting together the composition from the elements that he's been inspired by. And as he does it, the representational part of it starts to break down. And what you start to see as you look at it is that he's really concerned with harmony, bringing the harmonies of the different parts together. So the colors of the sky work their way down into the landscape, right? The side of that house is the same color as the mountain, right? And you start to get a bit where there's a splash of paint there, so it knits the composition together, right? To go up to the mountain, this is why I think it's so cool. These are meant to be clouds, right? But you'll notice that the colors of the landscape also work their way into the sky, right? So this cloud here has got some green on the side of it, right? And there's some green that appears up in here as well. In some of these compositions, we know that there's a branch from where he's standing that kind of comes over here, and he sort of obliterated that, right? He's sort of gotten rid of it. And I'll show you that in just a second. And if you look at the mountain and the clouds, you'll notice that the same colors of the sky are used for the mountain. And the only way you can tell it's mountain or sky is sometimes a simple line, like this one here. It's the only thing that separates this from this, because these are really the same tone. You know? He's structuring everything. If you look over here, right? This tone here is the same for this tone here. That one there, reappears down here. Right? Sky is mountain, mountain is sky. Everything is part of the composition. This part is great, right? And then, so I didn't realize until I saw this picture in person, right? That's it right there. The tip of the mountain that's never eroded is bare canvas. He never touched it with paint. Right? You have to Philadelphia and look close. There's nothing, there's no paint there, which means he built this entire composition around knowing he's going to leave a part of it. Right? The most solid part of the mountain isn't even painted. You can see some of the sketch on the canvas there beneath the paint that he left it behind. So, he shares certain things with the Impressionists. He loves doing the same thing over and over again so that he can capture differences. But unlike the Impressionists, who did the same thing over and over again to capture different times of day, different fall of light, right? What Cezanne is interested in is structure. He's interested in breaking it down so that he can see, investigate, right? Deconstruct, and then reconstruct. So here we can see that tree whose branches gave him probably the inspiration to put those greens into the sky. And he's gotten rid of the branches. We can see some of the elements, these are painted from roughly the same spot, right? Some of the elements that inspired him to stick these things into the landscape, right? But again, as he works on this over decades and decades, on something like 30 different canvases showing Mont Saint-Victoire, he is breaking it down. He's analyzing it. And this is what separates him from the Impressionists. He's not doing it again and again to capture a different time of day, to capture a different weather pattern. He's doing it again and again because he's interested in what happens in this four-square piece of real estate that's his canvas. So again, this is Aix-en-Provence is where he's painting. So it is on the slideshow, so you'll have it when you review your PowerPoint. One more of these, also from his, I think this is fantastic. And if you don't know the series of Mont Saint-Victoire, it's impossible to tell that this work, which I don't even know if he intended it to be finished or not. He stopped painting it about a year before he died, so maybe it's good enough, you know. But you'll notice that the mountain, which is here, right? There's our mountain. It's simply a blank spot left on the canvas, and you can see what he's doing. He's patching. He's looking up and he's seeing something. He's painting on site. He's painting outside. But when he sees it, he's not looking at it and going, "Oh, I want to get that detail. Oh, I want to make sure I get that outline right." What he's doing is he's just being inspired by it and throwing down patches of paint. So this is, I think, what ties them together on a certain level with what we saw with Van Gogh, with what we saw with Toulouse-Lautrec, is that for all of them, the color, the paint, the composition is becoming divorced from description. Right? He's not worrying about making it look like what he saw. He's worried about whether or not the colors work together on the canvas. And James, an acquired taste. I side with you. Because when I was an undergrad, I thought, what a jerk. Right? What a cheap, lazy way to paint. But now I'm like, oh man, I wish I could. I wish I had that. Because when I sit down and draw, when I sit down and paint, I don't paint anymore, but when I sit down and draw, I'm like a stickler for trying to make it look like what I'm seeing. And why do that? Now that we got photographs by this time, right? Why bother? Yeah? Paint is itself something else. The painting is something else. This is what Manet started for us, right? Is the idea that the painting is an object in addition to being a description of something, right? And Cezanne is taking that object side and pushing it, right? Really focusing on it. So, we're getting there. Last work by Cezanne, he merits more than a few because he did so many wonderful things with it. We've got a room of Cezanne downtown. He did a lot of still lifes as well, where he's also breaking all of the rules. So again, the same things we saw with the Monks and Victoire series, where colors are no longer isolated to describing a form, but rather spread across the entire canvas. And so we pick up that sort of sky blue in parts of the tapestry that's underneath the milk jug, but we also see on the top of the table and on that piece of white cloth that hangs over the table, on the bit of porcelain pottery in the back on the right. We start to see colors from the apples and the peaches be picked up in the table and on the tabletop. And again, he's trying to use the different colors and setting up the still life and painting. It's not for allegorical purposes, right? When we look at earlier still life, what we saw was, a skull, right? As a symbolic element. There's this great big banquet that hasn't been polished off. I mean, sort of moral overview. But they're not just arranging it because it's a composition. Right? And painting the different parts of it to, again, find another way, like the Monks and Victoire, where he can really focus on how do the different parts of the composition work. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's done what he sees. And this is most obvious when you look at this picture. If you look at the side of that table, it's blurry with the stage. It's great on my screen. It's not so big here. The perspective is all wonky, isn't it? Right? Perspective says that parallel lines go back in space and get closer together. Right? Now look what happens on the side of the table. It sort of says, now I think what he's trying to do is to show the kind of the table. Right? And that's all well and good. But he does these things where he knows the rules, he knows how to draw, and he's consciously breaking them. Okay, so that's the thing, right? It's not that he's a bad painter yet. I think he's gotten through all of that, and he's worked his way through quite a few steps. And got to a point where he knows the rules and he knows how to break them. In order to amplify certain elements of the composition, and a lot of it's not nature, it's just healing, right? Healing is just that. So, on the right, your studio architect will slap you upside the head and say, figure out your perspective. But he's doing it because he realized that bringing it down a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's placed this way against the strain a little bit better. To have it be down like that, right? This line on the table, right? This appearance that goes into the shadow here. And when it comes out the other side, it's actually not quite lined up either. And lines that seem to describe things all of a sudden disappearing. Look what happens to the leg of that table down here. Because as he's painting it, he realizes that if he had just stayed with description, it would have been boring. Right? And it wouldn't have succeeded as strongly as a composition as what he's doing here. another nice close-up where you can see the degree to which he's really building it up, too. This is a well-wrought work of art. He's not just slightly throwing things down, but the paint is, in fact, applied relatively thickly, but not with the same sort of expressive penmanship that we saw with Van Gogh. So again, what do we get from post-impressionism, right, from these three different artists? Certainly this idea that description and paint, right, description and color, are becoming increasingly divorced from one another, right? That the composition, the painting as an object, is becoming every bit as important, or even more important, than the painting as a representation. Now, it doesn't go away, right? Van Gogh's Public Gardens carries meaning as a subject matter. At the same time, we're seeing the fact that he's interested in less in describing those trees than in how the colors work together, how they express, or for Cézanne, how they structure. These become the overwhelming concerns. And it pushes us into the 20th century. The lessons of Cézanne are seen everywhere in the first decade of the 20th century. He died in 1906. There's a huge retrospective of his works in Paris. Everybody sort of sat up and paid attention. And lessons painters learned from Cézanne, we find again and again and again. Now, where's my note? Where's the phone goofy? Hang on a second. 3, 2, 1. That's because I didn't call it. There we are. So, major impact on 20th century art comes out of Cézanne in a lot of ways. In fact, somebody asked Picasso at the big retrospective show in 1906, what do you think about Cézanne? He said he's the father of us all, metaphorically. There's nothing we're going to do that he didn't already do. So when we look at Matisse, Henri Matisse, roughly the same time period as Cézanne, but obviously very, very different in style, isn't he? Now, Cézanne has already divorced color from representation. Matisse takes it further, doesn't he? Now there's absolutely no relationship between the color of the paint and the thing he was looking at. There is no way that all of those boats in the harbor had orange masts and blue hulls. There's no way that anybody would have painted in the 1960s, right, but would paint the inside of their house with greens and purples and blues splotched together like that. Right? The colors are chosen for the composition. It's the lesson of Cézanne. Right? Taken, you might argue, taken to its extreme, where now the colors are almost lurid. James, this is another acquired taste. I love Matisse now. I used to hate it. I don't know what it is. I started looking at the colors differently. Because sometimes they're a little bit jarring, right? Pinks and greens next to each other like that are a bit much. You know? If this were imagine this as a screensaver on your computer, right? You would just be migraine city, right? I'm way off my notes. There are precedents for this, the way Matisse is using color. Certainly, Cézanne is one of them, but the idea of taking color and totally divorcing it from description is something that another post-impressionist, who is in the online art space, did quite well. Paul Gauguin was friends with Van Gogh, ended up moving to Tahiti to get away from civilization, to look for something more primal. And here we see, while certainly Polynesia has colors you don't see in Europe, there's no way that she's standing on a purple ground, right? With green and red flowers floating around like that, with those squirmy sperm-like things around her feet, right? Gauguin is one of the lessons for Matisse as well, coming out of that color does not have to describe. Color can exist for its own purposes, whether they're for composition like Cezanne had done, or whether they're for expression. Matisse had some money. He was actually collecting art. He owned a couple of Van Goghs. He owned a couple of Gauguins. He owned a Cezanne. He knows these works. And he's channeling their ideas into something new. The one that's in your text, you'll notice that with Matisse, the colors have become super saturated. There's sort of no soft colors here. Even the pastel ones, like the pigs, have a sort of richness that jumps off the canvas. You'll also notice that, especially with the face of the woman, but in the room as well on the right, the degree to which the color is no longer at all based on what you saw. Right? Yellow, green cheeks, blue eyes, pink and blue cheek jawbones. Right? In the open window picture, the fact that the single wall that you see around those French doors starts off in the lower left corner, purple, turns teal, turns blue, turns forest green, turns purple again. Eventually ends up bare canvas in the lower right corner. Right? This is not what he taught. The dialogue is between the painter and the canvas. The important thing is the composition. But he's also, to get here, to champion the color, has gotten rid of black. There's no black anywhere in his works. Shadows are dark and rich colors. So he's taking the lesson of Cezanne here in the early 20th century, he's moving beyond Cezanne into something new, into something radical, into something about as modern can be in 1905. A kind of painting that simply doesn't look like what he saw. As he's laying down the paint, he does these really amazing things. First, there's obviously the colors we're talking about. Look at the French doors themselves and the pinks that you see there. And how he thought through what the colors should be and worked these pinks and reds. And then the reflections of greens that you're getting on the window itself. But also notice that, again, the perspective is all cattywampus, right? The panes on the window simply don't work as a perspective study. Once perspective stops working, you as a viewer stop thinking about the picture as a window that you look through. Going back to Renaissance art, we go all the way back to Renaissance art. One of the things we saw in Renaissance art about perspective, right, is that the picture frame sitting on the wall started looking like a window that we saw through, right? And so you would see railroad tracks going back or something in 3 dimensions, you know, on the horizon. And all of a sudden it looks as if this world is continued out here. So what we have is a view, a window on the wall. And as you look at the picture, you become more concerned with what it depicts than the fact that it's a flat surface you're really looking at. The artist has pulled a trick on it, right? You don't look at the picture, you look at what illustrates the picture. You look through that surface. When he starts to mess with the senses, you're reminded that this frame is not a window that you look through. That this frame contains a flat surface with a bunch of paint on it. And he keeps reminding us of that we're not looking through to an extension of our faith. The paint that's closest to us, which would be the inside of the room, right, is mostly the thinnest application of paint. And you'll notice, if you look at it, some of the paint's really thick. The clouds outside the window, for example, are very thickly painted. Classified ocular vision, right? You know the distance, sorry, the distance from pupil to pupil, right? And the triangle that it makes, so the thing that they're looking at is what gives us a sense of three-dimensionality. And that's why we can see things three-dimensionally better when they're closer to us than when they're further away. It goes back to what I had when I was in grad school, which said, don't try to pass a car if the car is turning at you and if you can see it's moving, if you can see that it's moving. Right? Because from a distance, we don't see that. Because the triangle is here. So when it's close, you can see it. Okay? This is why people with one eye are relying just on scale, right? To see things. Okay? So ideally, the things that are closest to you should be the things that are most three-dimensional, right? And the things that are further away get flatter. Look to the horizon to the west. Look towards Fort Royal and see the mountains out there. I think that's close to three-dimensional. Well, what Matisse has done, and again, this is reassuring you, re-emphasizing that it's a flat surface. That the stuff that's closest to you inside of the room is, in fact, often the thinnest painted. And as we move into distance, some of the paint is thicker, which contradicts the way that we perceive things. And it makes you remember that, oh yeah, I'm not looking at some French doors on a terrace with some flowers in the harbor. I'm looking at paint on a surface. At the same time, it's not consistent in it, right? So some of the stuff that's close to you, like the cross beam of the top clear story part of that window, is very, very thickly painted. And some of the areas in the distance, the clouds are thick, but the spaces between the masts of the boats are not. Right? Everything makes you aware of the fact that you're looking at paint on a surface. That you're not looking at whatever the title of the painting says that it is. It may as well just be untitled, or composition, because that's really what the picture is. This is very, very brave way. This is breaking all of the rules. This is really moving forward away from what art had always been. Going back really to the Renaissance, where art presented itself as an extension, a logical extension of the world that we live in. That we can look past the frame, we can look through the surface of the picture into a world that continues our world. Matisse is playing with that idea. He's upending it. It's a nice comparison in a way. Weird, but nice. In that, right behind Arlecchino, remember we got a mirror that shows us looking at it. Right? There's a seamless connection between the space that Van Eyck creates and the space that we inhabit. Right? The frame of the picture is like a window frame. Matisse paints a window, but at the same time it doesn't open up in the same way. It doesn't give you a sense of moving through it into depth, into completing our space. And what we'll find in the next week is that this window metaphor, choosing the window as a subject matter for modern artists, is an important one early on. Because Renaissance art had made the painting a window. Now Matisse gives us a window. But it's not. It's just paint. Now, he exhibited this picture. He's gone out to the south of France. Couillard is outside of Marseille as well. And he's gone down there for a couple of summers running with three other artists. André Durand was one of them. All painting in this new style, which is all color, no black, right? Everything flattening out the subject matter, right? Where it just becomes color on a surface. They come back again in the fall of 1906. They exhibit together Rose, this is one of these alternative venues. The Fall Cologne, right? It has nothing to do with Rose Academy, but it's the one in this room. So, the Fall on, the ball's up, right? These are shown together. And it's a fairly big show. In fact, it more or less replaced the annual Royal Academy Salon, except that they allowed modern art. They allowed avant-garde art. And these were shown together in the shape of rooms. The teeth and the that we're working with, Duran, Fleming, a couple others. The press went ballistic. They thought that this was just simply too much. Right? They'd gotten used to Cezanne. They'd gotten used to Van Gogh. But they weren't ready for this. And they compared the paintings to things made by wild beasts. They said they looked like they were made by les fauves, which in French means wild beasts. And again, like the Impressionists, they said, okay, we'll buy that. And this movement that Matisse is working with here, this movement toward all color, becomes known as fauvism, right? Which comes from wild beasts. And again, it's this idea that the artist appears to be untrained, appears to be savage. And in fact, he's really intending it as anything but. I've got a wonderful quote from him. Let me see if I can find it here. Here's what Matisse said. I want to create an art of balance, of purity and serenity, devoid of troubling or depressing subject matter. This is why he chooses, images of boats in a harbor, restful harbor in the south of France. Who wouldn't want to be down there, right? That way, when it gets sticky like it is today, there's a nice ocean breeze. Right? Here's the cicadas. Devoid of troubling or depressing subject matter. And then he says, I want my paintings to be something like a good armchair where you can rest from physical fatigue. He's focusing entirely on the effect of the colors on you, the viewer. Right? Getting rid of anything that he thinks might be troubling in the way of subject matter. And this is something he continues through his entire career, up until the 50s when he dies. Now, what we're seeing with Matisse and the Fauves is taking a cue from Cezanne, or really the post-impressionists, this idea that color does not have to describe. Color does not have to be linked to the thing that you see in nature. Color has a role to play as part of a painting, independent from description. That's the cue he's taking. And from Cezanne in particular, it's the organization of these colors as part of a composition that should be your first and foremost task, not describing the thing you see. Right? That's the lesson of Cezanne. Cezanne provided lessons for Picasso as well, the other great movement of the first decade of the 20th century. Right? Take cues from Cezanne, but different ones from what Matisse had taken. For Matisse, it's so important the way Cezanne divorced color from the object, used color for composition. For Picasso, Cezanne helped him focus on structure. Everything about the composition being about structure. And he takes what Cezanne had done, where he made solid things look empty, and he made empty things look solid. Well, this is exactly what Picasso is doing as well. Everything is either a solid or a void. The background blues are every bit as solid as the foreground flesh. And everything is rendered with the same sort of angularity. Wherever you look, it's a knitted composition. The lesson of Cezanne. This is not the one I wanted to show you right away. We'll go to this one instead. While he's doing this, while he's structuring every part of the composition, he's using repeated forms that look very much like geometric forms everywhere we look. Triangles, cubes. Remember what Cézanne said. Imagine the world as if it were cubes and cylinders and globes. Picasso's doing that. Okay? And at the same time he's doing it, he's also imagining a world where, again, this idea of being avant-garde, breaking the rules, right? What does this tell you? That you had to stand in one position. That perspective picture relies on the fact that you don't move. Because if you move, then the perspective moves, right? So if I'm standing here, this wall does one thing, but if I move over here, it does something else, right? You. So I'm looking at you here. Stand here, I see this side of your head. But how do we experience the world, right? Do we stand still all that often? Well, I mean, you do it for an hour, 15 minutes, but, right, we don't. And even then, our head moves and our head. And what Picasso does is not only does he make the concept from Cézanne, where the picture is more important than what it represents. Which, by the way, is processing. Closing for you. Right? Trying to show off that stuff, although I'm always curious about closing the whole way forward. Right? Nonetheless, if you're closing for you, you take your choice of those things. Right? So now that he's breaking the rules in that he's making the solid and the empty parts, the solid and the void, similar in the way he treats them. Right? And focusing on the composition rather than on the description. But he's breaking the rules in a different way, which is that he's bringing into the picture the idea that we move through space. That our view of things, our understanding of our world, is not based on the picture viewpoint. So we see faces from the front and noses from the side. We see figures with their legs crossed as if they're laying down, but they're standing up like the ones next to them. So we look at, across horizontally, we look vertically, we look from the side. Time enters into it. You are not a fixed person in looking at the concept. This is, again, artists taking things and really breaking every possible rule. The fact that he structures so much of the composition with these geometric forms, cubes and triangles, they look like prisms almost, gave this kind of painting its nickname. And again, it was intended as a derision, and the cubists took it as praise. It's as if it were made of little cubes. Right? In fact, it was Matisse, I think, that said that. Right? He didn't like this very much because they have good color. Right? And you notice that in order to focus on the structure, what Picasso does, he plays down the color. Not anywhere near so bright as this. The teacher looks at it and goes, yes, I'm not sure. Right? And Picasso said, okay, that's good. We'll use that. Right? That's our term. In addition to the sort of cubist elements of it, you'll notice the other thing that Picasso's doing is he's disfiguring the figures as well. And he gives these two figures on the right faces that look like masks. So they're almost terrifying, frightening, Halloween masks, if you will. But these come from things that he had been looking at. There was a new museum in Paris of ethnographic art. And Picasso was looking at African masks. And was channeling those sorts of forms into the faces of the two women on the right. This brings up sort of an interesting element for Picasso, for modern art in general, for everything we've looked at since Manet. We've seen artists turning to non-Western art as a way to get around old, stale traditions. Ever since the realist movement, we've been looking at art that's trying to take the modern world, and modern art for the modern era. And that idea is brought up by the fact that the Industrial Revolution has sped up our living modern, living different than probably any other time in history up to that point. And they're looking, as they're trying to make an art that is going to illustrate the modern world, they're looking for something different. Why should the art from the past be used to illustrate this modern world? Can we have modern art for the modern world? And this is what inspires people like Degas to look at Japanese prints, because they represent in a different way. They make different compositional choices. This can be used to break the tradition. So that you can make an art system, a modern art for the modern world. So Degas looks at, and others look at Japanese art. Gauguin goes to Tahiti, becomes interested in Tahitian forms. All of this is used as ways to break free from the stifling legacy of the Renaissance. Picasso's the next step in this, turning to African art, turning to an art that is less refined, right? More harshly carved, and trying to incorporate those elements into his picture to make it that much more modern. Now, no one works in a bubble. Picasso begins to share a studio with another painter. In fact, it's their dealers who set them up. And from about 1908 through 1912, Picasso and Georges Braque share a studio side by side, painting opposite corners of the same room. They got on very, very well. Braque said later, we were like two mountaineers climbing a hill, where one would go up, the hill, not right, where a cliff, where one would go up and set the point, tie off the rope. Then the other one would come up while he waited there and go up higher, set the next point. And they would leapfrog each other up the hill. Braque understands where Picasso's going with this, and he takes it a step further. In this image of the harbor, he's using Cézanne's lesson about structuring everything to the point where you have nothing but cubes everywhere you look. Foreground, background. And to focus on this, Braque begins to get rid of all but about two colors, brown and green. And once you get rid of the color, you start to look at only the structure, that cubic structure of the work. Right? So he's learning from what Picasso had done, taking it a step further, pushing it even further past representation. Picasso sees this and goes a step further. This was decorated for a library. It was a suite of pictures was never completed, but it's difficult in this to see where the nude woman is. It's also difficult to see anything but browns. He's taken what Braque has done and pushed it a step further, using what they see, using the subject matter to analyze composition. And this is why the two of them call this analytic cubism. They're breaking down, they're deconstructing. They're analyzing composition. And as they put it back together again, break up the parts that they may have seen, it doesn't matter whether or not it looks like what they saw. Every other year or so, I have a student who can find the nude in there. I still can't. I still have trouble looking for it. I mean, I see things that based on the demoiselle look like this is probably the head here, right? And this is the torso through here, right? But at the same time, Picasso doesn't want us to really do that. He's been looking at the face, looking at the angle of the nose, looking at shoulders, elbows, hips, reducing them to these geometric forms and then putting them back together again in a way that suggests that I might be looking at something from the front or from the side. I might be looking at the figure or the background. all been reconstructed based on this analysis. An analysis of form. Okay, we will pick up Cubism, wrap it up, and move on into some other movements on Monday. Good luck this weekend working on your paper. If you are having trouble anywhere with your paper, you know who you can email for help, right? I can certainly guide you in the right direction that way.